All right, so just out of quick hands, how many people on this call have participated in these ACE dialogues and the strategic planning framework to date? And not everybody's hands are available, so you use the clapping hands, the thumbs. Wow, significant number. So this, I don't have to give you all the context. That's why I asked the question. Just for those who are listening, the deal is the following. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the treaty that leads to the Kyoto and Paris and the IPCC, has a requirement and a recommendation. The requirement is that you do education, training, public access, public participation, public awareness, and international collaboration to support climate actions across the world, all parties, all countries, parties as countries. Subsequent to the original treaty, which is 1992, and this is the strongest mandate for us to do the work we're doing, the Clean Network across the country, there was an additional recommendation to kind of build those together in a more synergistic way to do something called ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment, not our Alliance for Climate Education. And they knew about that when they made that name, but they went ahead anyway. So, and that was back in 2012. The guide came out in 2015. We actually looked at it in some of the early work we were doing in the clean community for kind of strategy work. But it became clear that this is a powerful tool. It is needed. Like we were alluding to before, the clean has been at this game for a long time, but we never had a strategy. All of us are doing strategic work, but we don't have a common unifying strategy. So through the kick and the keister from some people, Deb, I'm thinking about you, and some other people requesting that we should go here, we went here. The Clean Network formally got behind this, the Clean Leadership Board, in December of 19, and we embarked on a process without a clear funding strategy for how we would do all this. That has been solved partially. And so we've went to the dialogues in August. And so this is, the more and more I've been part of this, it's clear that we're doing something very important. We're doing something very different than other countries, the way they've approached this, because of our unique circumstance. This is an unofficial process. I had to clarify that with State Department. They participated in the dialogues. I had to report on this for the United States government in the ACE dialogues for the Caribbean and the Americas recently on the 23rd. But what it afforded us is a deep, rich bottom structure for how would we want this done, not how the national government, because if you listen to other countries, comes a lot of the top architecture is coming down. That's just not how the reality of our country can work right now, nor is it probably the best way for us to do this. So that's gotten us to now. So here's the update. And then Zatis, you're here. And so actually, you know what? I'm gonna pause that. Zatis, put your camera back on. Come on, stop hiding.
I knew, sorry, it's just like I'm putting my phone and it's like trembling, so I didn't want it to.
It's okay. But I want to introduce you all to somebody amazing. So Zatis Citron Rodriguez. Did I get that close?
Yeah.
I'm getting there. I'm gonna have to get much better at my Spanish. I have a clear. If you haven't, you already got to know her some through the dialogues, but Zatis, this is your first clean call?
I think it's my third one.
Third?
Yeah, right. I think she actually presented on something, didn't she? I was trying to.
Yeah, on this ACE.
Yeah, all the way back in the beginning of this. All right, that's cool. Well, I just want to make sure nobody, sometimes, not everybody knows everybody. We didn't do introductions because it's not that informal, but the one thing that I want to call out here, and then Zatis, I wouldn't mind if you would spend a little bit of time, is one of the most powerful things we did in this dialogue and kind of bottom-up structure was use the Engage for Climate toolkit, using the Talanoa dialogue, but the backcasting approach for actually designing this community-driven process. And that's all coming to our our process from Zati. So I found it to be incredibly powerful in what it's yielding for us. We have a draft framework. We're sending it to the strategic reviewers the next round tomorrow. And then it'll go to community review on October 22nd at 1 o'clock Eastern time. So that's the first time some of you are hearing this. So if you grab that calendar, you'll be a save the date, registration thing coming out very soon. But, October 22nd at 1 o'clock Eastern is when the closing session and the launch of the community review will occur. So Zatis, would you give us just why do you think the backcasting approach is so powerful?
Yeah, I think that am I outside? Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't on mute. So one of the great things about backcasting is that it creates a collective vision, and then we think together as a path forward to get to in order for us to see how do we get to that main goal that we are setting. But that vision is not something it's oh, this is where we need to be, what are the steps. It's more of how we all envision what is an ambitious and systematically transforming education, training, and all the elements from ACE working together to accelerate climate action. And then in the backcasting, that what we did was okay, so we envision a United States in 20 years, and then we kind of set different milestones or goals as we move backward, as in, okay, so where we need to go where we need to be in 10 years if we were to attain that 20-year vision. And then we move closely 10, 5, and 2, so that we get into more concrete recommendations that are conductive of policy implementation.
And I mean, from your perspective, Zatis, did you find that we gave it a shot, we did it, but what do you think we got as we did it? And maybe Deb, maybe you don't all know, Deb is on the writing team for the framework. So we brought in a guy named Tom Bowman, who's working with Deb Morrison, who've just been kicking hard deadlines and have developed a framework. The coordinating team have already reviewed it, given them substantive feedbacks. You've already taken all those substantive feedback and generated a version 2 of the framework, and that goes to strategic reviewers tomorrow. I'll share, if you look at the roadmap, you can see who they are. That's all been articulated there and where we are in the process. Deb and the Zatis and have, do you think that this backcasting thing has yielded something valuable for all of us?
It's amazing. And a big shout out to all the work that Asatis and Haley both. Haley Krim is also heavily involved in just the giant lift that all those meetings were in August, and the listening sessions. But we have heard things that I think we wouldn't have heard if the process wasn't done this way. So things about the nature of how we go forward with the work, how decisions are made, who's invited into that, how different aspects of the work need to sort of unfold in particular ways. And some things that, one of the things that came up this morning, we were also on a meeting this morning with the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform for sort of the broader ECOS community. We met with people from across the world this morning. That was after I talked to you, Frank, or before. Lots of meetings this morning. Anyway, part of that work is sort of woven back and forth with these larger international conversations and the national ones. And one of the things that came up in our national conversations was the need to really ground our work in work that's going on already in Indigenous communities, tribal nations, justice organizations across the US, and build from that work instead of just doing a top-down method, that the top-down policies need to support the existing work and properly resource and fund it in ways that help us coordinate that work more deeply across the US, but don't usurp it. And so that being sort of a goal, so that we're not necessarily trying to have a government-led initiative in the States. That's actually, a lot of the voices in the pool said, don't do that, but more have a government coordinated movement. And so coordinated and funded movement. And so I think that was, we would not have got that if we started as a top-down move necessarily. And there were some real specifics inside that. So it's really helpful.
Frank, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I do have a burning question I want to ask, but I don't. I don't want to.
Don't just burn. Let it go, man. This is
okay.
Formal. What do you want to know?
Sounds good. So on this one, I'm going to ask you to polish off your crystal balls.
Okay. Sure. Consider them polished.
Okay. Well, what I've heard, I mean, the way that the whole strategic planning has been presented as is what we're doing is preparing something in the event that basically in the event we have a regime change.
Sure.
And so that's plan A. What I'm wondering about is what's plan B?
Well, so look, I mean, I'll take the scenario. One scenario is that we have significant national resources aligned on advancing climate priorities in the near future. That is a foregone conclusion that will occur.
Okay.
That, you know, it's just a matter of when, right? So usually, like, you know, I like the idea of a lot of science fiction, you know, got the what's going to happen right. They just got the when wrong. And so the fact that I could take phone calls on my watch, Dick Tracy had that a long time ago. They're just the when was way off. So that's not a total answer to your question, but it is clear from the work we did across multiple meetings, and we articulated that in the appendix, that education, training, and all the other dimensions of ACE are critical to accelerating climate action. Now the question here was the how. And remember, this is a framework for how to guide really doing a national strategy, not the national strategy itself. But, you know, the thing that as a federal leader, to try and imagine how we would do all the work that is called for in the framework without national leadership is massively hard to think through. Because the unknowns on that are really, really tricky. I mean, I was joking with Deb earlier this morning that if, you know, a bunch of billionaires came together and put together a trust for advancing ACE in the United States, sure. Why they didn't do that years ago, I don't know. But I just don't see that coming. But, you know, one of the things I took away from, and I'll stop speaking here, from what I heard other countries doing at the national level in the Americas and Caribbean ACE dialogue was they were looking at comprehensive policy analysis across all related policies through all the parts of the government and the funding architectures and stuff. You know, we've never tried to do that as a community, never even come close. We were happy that NSF, NASA, and NOAA gave out grants you know, for a period of time. And, you know, some people in this community are getting new grants and state money starting to show up, but it's really not even close to adequate to what we know is needed. That aligns with what Izatis said that our community called for. And so, you know, when you hear what Chile and Costa Rica and Colombia and Dominican Republic are doing related to ACE, it's a completely different approach. And I think that that's more commensurate to what is necessary based on what we've learned by doing it. But just, you know, the funding levels are just completely inadequate to what we know is needed. How you get there, I just see other countries using other tools that are much more powerful. And so, you know, if you're trying to figure it out at a state by state level or consortium of states, it's just a much smaller play. I mean, we'll do it if we have to, but it just doesn't feel adequate to the task before us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the funding things that's coming out, Frank, is, so Frank G, is the idea that it's not even just that there's uncoordinated and like ridiculously difficult to navigate funding structures and inadequate funding structures that are in existence. It's that the way that those funding structures are organized really means that the people who get the funding are in particular positions in the world. And the people who are doing the work already are in totally different positions. And I had the situation this year where I wrote with tribal partners, and they led the work of what they wanted to do this NSF grant. And it was a huge lift for them to apply for an NSF grant because of the complicated structures of the NSF grant portal, right? And so we need to just change that. We need to change that radically in some way. Like the best would be just to dump, not necessarily eliminate it because it serves a function, but to like, you know, create a whole bunch of other funding to fill all the cracks that is easier to access and like much more dynamic in nature. Because also a year timeline to get a grant, you got to be kidding. This stuff is happening so much faster and people are doing it regardless. So, you know, figuring out how to do small grant funds that are a much more rapid cycle would be much better.
So if I do a very simplistic summary of what I've heard both of you say, it sounds like, okay, if we, under Plan A, this document that's produced applies to both federal and subnational players. If it's Plan B, it's still useful, but now we're focusing on the subnational players.
Well, and we're still focusing on national, but it may not be the federal government that does that play. So we're still going to go for foundations and other types of like national level coordination because it's needed, but it's unlikely to be the federal government depending on what the outcome is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Jen, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, for instance, like New York State is incredibly ambitious with the new Climate Act that we've that Governor Cuomo has put into play. And, you know, if we can have, you know, and I've been in conversations, Frank's been in these conversations as well as a number of other partners across the state, this kind of idea of like, if we had a framework for climate change education that we could like bring forward and present to the governor, like that would be amazing, or that we could get support at the state level in the state house of like that would be incredible to be able to make that sort of, you know, we want it to fit and align with what the state needs are. And that's where the framework flexibility is really critically important, because the states, you know, so anyway, I have a lot to say about the state work on this, but, you know, I think in the long goal is that, you know, I see like if things, whether or not things are successful in November, like whatever happens in November, like that happens, but no matter what, we still have like state and subnational work and coordination that we can do across states, coalitions of states, that we are still in campaign. I mean, there's so much work that's happening at the subnational level that we're trying to reach out and include those representatives, those communities, those organizations and agencies that are doing that in this process. So I feel like we've been doing that and we're doing a better job. We still need to do more. There's still so much work that needs to be done, but none of the work that we've done to date is going to go to waste. I mean, this is all like pushing us forward, and it's more coordinated than we've ever been. And it's really exciting. I love the momentum of it all. It's what gets me up in the morning right now.
And Jen, I feel like you gave me like the perfect segue. So I'm going to have
Oh, yes, please.
What other work needs to be done on this? Why, I have an excellent task for everyone on this call. So think about like what it is, like what sphere that you influence to be able to write about the strategic planning framework as it comes out in different op-ed spaces. Because what we need to do is we need to lift this type of work. So like with the website that Frank gave, and we'll have like more of a press release kind of thing that we can just circulate around as we get to that point. But we're about a month out now, like roughly, for a release of this. And we want to make sure that when it 2 months out, my 2 months out, 2
November 30th.
I just
November,
like
you scared the hell out of me.
Deadline, and I just do that. So anyway, but but what we want to do is when we're at that point, we want to have like the community at large prepped for like, here we go. Like, let's like circulate this out to our networks. Let's get the momentum behind it. So thinking about where you may want to write into this space for your own communities, like we've already drafted a climate literacy kind of one for Washington State to name the Climb Time Initiative and name the strategic planning framework as hooking together these pieces. And so like, we're ready to go for when that, and we have some mechanisms internally. Tom is like, amazing. So about like how we can potentially get these op-ed pieces like out into the universe through Climate Nexus or others. And so like really think about that question, and like we'll come back to you in like a month and a half with like, so.
Yeah, I think that what we did in the conceptualizing what this framework or strategy should be like, that having how these structures and how their representation should be, so that the climate action actually goes into the communities or actually follows what the communities need. I think that's like a fundamental thing that we have addressed in how to do that. Not that, not that communities have not said that, but now it's under straight recommendation for coordinating all of these efforts. And as Frank was saying, all of these have been happening regardless of national effort. So now what we need is to, if we don't get federal, like the federal support that we hope to get, we just need to try to weave all that together into push to get there. And it might be that it's not there where we can get like the subnational, but still pushing for that this transformational structure is in place everywhere. But that just means that we need to coordinate what our efforts in strategizing how to get there, whether it's op-eds or talking to several policymakers, et cetera, that might be interested in this. That will be very important. So it's just like the game changes, like the board changes, but the goal is still the same.
Do we, we've got about 12 minutes left. I also want to remind you all that the goal is we're shooting for 2030. There's an element to this is 2040, but the 10 years of action feels right in a lot of dimensions here. Then once you get those 10 years done, then you can get to the next 10, then the next 10, because this is a multi-decadal effort here. However we move together. Whatever strategies we need to get, we get there together. So, also it just occurred to me that a great deal of gratitude to so many people that made this possible, funders that made this possible. If the CCL hadn't come in, we wouldn't have Zoom the way we did. If Spencer hadn't come in the way we wouldn't been able to pay people for their time and their thoughts and their contributions. There's a lot of key pieces here that are, this is a massive effort. That's, a lot of people have been rolling up their sleeves. So, but Frank, I'm a big fan of seeing success. And I think and putting all my energy into that coming true, and then having a backup strategy real fast if it doesn't. That's just my way of being in the world. So, I'm almost averse to putting energy into failure scenarios, just because it feels like it calls it forth. My mom was a hippie, so if you're hearing it, that's where it's coming from. I'm glad you're laughing. She'd like that. Anyway, any other questions about this? Don't want to chew up all the time with just talking. Anything you want to know?
Okay, Frank, it would be along the lines of, this fits into a lot of what folks are talking about. When I'm thinking about here in California, there is a very strong, of course, there's the national level, and of course it changes, but there is, I mean, and there is kids and everybody saying, how do we affect policymakers and do things? There's just an awful lot of work called on to get it done now. I mean, California just announced phasing out the internal combustion engine in cars by 35, right? We're part of programs that are statewide on the kids, training them to be energy efficient professionals. I guess the thing of, for those of us who are kind of working it isn't, no matter what the federal government or what the government people do, it's still going to take people on the ground doing whatever we're going to do, right? I mean, we still have to make the innovations, build the new cars, make things more efficient. I mean, the kids are going to be trained for this, that there's that going on. And maybe this is just a sense of inspiration in certain areas. That's very much underway. This is not waiting. We're getting this done, and we need the kids to do that. And I mean, that's a lot of what I get involved in. We're just doing it. We're going, and it's how to have that happening.
So Jim, there's one thing I've been noticing in this work is that what you're saying is absolutely true, but there's another challenge here. Is that when it is organic and propagates naturally from within parts of the system, there's so much missed opportunities for leverage and collaboration and sharing. That's what we're seeing. I'll give you a really concrete example that I see coming. We're going to master our floating offshore wind turbine technology. It's coming. It's in the R&D phase. It's probably moving beyond the R&D into the second R, the R&D and D, deployment. The amount of jobs it's going to take to have floating offshore wind turbines off of California is massive. There is no community college in California training students, or no career and technical high school training students on how to work in the 47 different job categories of offshore wind. None, zero. There's only one in the nation I found, and that's in Massachusetts. One. That just was propagated, and the guy's awesome. He's a wonderful guy, but he's a single person. But there's got to be more systematic work going on here that takes those bright spots and then brings them into the system scale deployments. If we're going to transform the number of jobs we need within the time frames we need them. We're not operating systemically yet. It's not to say that awesome work isn't happening. It's just not up and across, and that doesn't happen by itself. So I don't know if the fact that it exists is awesome. How do we make it exist in more places is really what I see the strategy opening up the door to doing.
No, and Frank, I totally agree in the thing of making those connections. I mean, all of us connecting in our different ways. That's a lot what we're doing here with Clean. Absolutely. Just because I want to make sure I underline, I'm with you. I'm not just spouting stuff. People don't often hear how I've earned my living. Right? I mean, I'm a volunteer as educator, but I'm not just some guy. I mean, part of my work has been putting in the first test system in the United States of how does that power from those wind turbines get to land. That takes a whole other way of delivering things. That's part of my work, is getting that first system built in the United States. That proves that it works, right? We did it under the San Francisco Bay, bringing 400,000 volts from one side of the bay to the other to power San Francisco as a way. But how to have it integrate exactly to be a model for others to happen. And we need kids, we need people educated to go, because as you're saying, it was like a struggle of, we were putting it in and nobody had done it before. Nobody had done it before. We had to bring in engineers from Germany who knew how to do it.
And one other thing I see in the chat, the idea of like the C3 framework, or I also think like NGSS is, the Next Generation Science Centers is a framework like that. Each of these types of frameworks offer something into the space as examples. I think the mind-boggling part of the ACE framework, and we're only doing like the sort of principles to guide right now to get to that framework, but one of the things that's mind-boggling about this is we're talking about not just K-12 education, not just higher ed education, not informal education, not vocational, like we're talking about all of it and more. We're talking about communication. We're talking about like, life-wide, lifelong, life deep learning. And like what does that look like in the context of moving the population to what has been named here of all these, we know what needs to be done, you know, Jim and Frank, like we know that these things are happening on the ground and they need to be done. What we need is an educated citizenry in a way, and most broad citizenry, including those who are not citizens, you know, who to do this, like vote for these things and like engage in this work in these local places. And that's really what, so this is kind of mind boggling in how vast it is in one way. And also it's just wonderfully amazing to be involved in it because it's happening. All this work is happening. It's how we coordinate it, make it funded and more efficient.
So we've just got 4 minutes left. Jen or Zatis, do you have any closing thoughts or any, before we go to any last questions? Zatis, anything you want to say?
I am super excited to see like where this goes and to have everyone join the community review. As I saw that most of the people like even participated. So that makes me really happy that we can provide you know, interim update of where we are. And I think that there are lots of ways that we can move forward with this, whether at federal level, whether pulling specific policy. I think we just need to make sure that we have a robust framework so we can strategize what is our next move after November 3rd happens. So, and then we can keep moving forward into trying to coordinate and uplift everything that it's already happening in the country.
Yep. And let's remember that the community reviews are due back to the writing team and the coordinating team on November 6th, ironically. So that'll be interesting to see. But, you know, I don't know what if you would change your comments independent of what happens. But I completely concur with the Zatis that the more substantive comments and edits and suggestions and commitments that you have here, the stronger this is. Because, you know, everyone pushing it into something that is better, it helps it actually thrive. And it is an act of emergence that is showing up here. So the more that people have, you know, and if there are other key minds that need to be, this is what its most expansive review. So if there are other key people that you think really should be thinking about this, you know, that will start October 22nd, run through November 6th. Then we'll take all that in and generate the final version. And then we'll begin strategic briefings and signatory process. And we haven't talked about that all that much here, but we do want to go into the new year with a very robust, you know, vision of how our field should work going forward and how we should work together and what we need to do it. So any other final points? Anybody?
I'm just proud of the process that was created to make it so transparent and inclusive. Like, I really feel that there's so much effort went into that, and I think it continues to be that way. And so I'm just really thrilled with that as an impact and an outcome, and like and as we're like thinking about it and documenting it, I think it's just super exciting and super hopeful. Like, that's how processes should work, how stuff like this should work. And so I feel like we're actually doing it, and that makes it's great to be a part of it.
I hope to be standing
all your leadership
in the community, to be standing together at COP26 in Glasgow, announcing the process and the product and the way forward. That is part of the vision here. You know, that as we regain the international community on leading on climate action, joining the leadership, I see that success. So hopefully we get that opportunity. So thank you all for being with us. We will resume the ACE dialogues. Next month, we're actually going to go to climate extension. I think a lot of people in this community need to really understand the depth of climate extension that's been emerging over the past couple of decades. So that's another key, unique piece of our ACE enterprise that is unique to, you know, a lot of the work we've done. So that's where we're going next. And if you have any other thoughts of areas where you think ACE, these listening sessions going forward, where we've not gone yet, let me know, and we can start building those panels. All right, so thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Ginger, before Katie closes us here, can you grab my link out of the chat? I threw it in a private chat. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, just
Patrick's is used to this close down slowness.
Yeah, I was hovering over the button.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
Okay. Bye.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.